Major funding for these broadcasts has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, AmTrust Title Insurance Company, Perfect Building Maintenance, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Marks Paneth LLP, Capital One Bank, Collins Building Services, Meridian Capital Group. Additional support has been provided by grants from AKA Hotel Residences Corman Communities, Ariel Property Advisors, Amerant Bank, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Briarwood Organization, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Citizens Bank, Dime Community Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Hodges Ward Elliott INC, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Casamatides Red Apple Group, Keysight Capital Partners, Matone Group, New Banks, Newmark Knight Frank, Ocean First Bank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rockefeller Group, Rosewood Realty Services, Stonehenge NYC, SVN CPEX Real Estate Services, Tierra CRG, the Meringer Family Foundation, and these friends. What's happening in the residential development market in the suburbs? Are there homes being built? Are there apartments being built? What's happening? Everybody talks about the suburbs, that people are migrating out of New York City to the suburbs. I don't know the answer, so today I've assembled this group of business leaders to provide their insight on the residential development of the suburbs of New York City. My guests include Christopher Capice, president of Heatherwood Luxury Rentals, Kevin Kelly, Senior Vice President and Group Manager at People's United Bank, Deborah Tantliff, Founding Principal of Tantum Real Estate, and last but not least, Corey Wesco, Vice President of Acquisitions, Northeast Corridor for the Pulte Group. So we have a residential developer, we have a banker, we have another residential developer, and we have a for sale developer, because Corey, I don't believe Pulte builds rental in the metropolitan area, correct?
That's correct. We are purely a for sale home builder.
So the rags, or I should say the newspapers, basically say that the for sale business is really doing well. How is it truly doing for Pulte Group in New Jersey?
It's a great question, Michael, and it's been a strange odyssey from January to now. You know, at the outset of the year, we felt very confident about what we were seeing from a demographic standpoint. Obviously, things went to a complete standstill, down to a complete halt about midway through March, and we really didn't see meaningful signs of life again, I tell you, until after Memorial Day. And then June, July, and August were the complete opposite phenomenon. You know, record-setting sales velocity, record-setting traffic, seemingly endless demand. And so where we sit here today, heading into the fall after this robust summer, you know, obviously very hopeful that the demand is sustainable. And at the same time, you know, we're trying to be mindful of the reality that there was probably a lot of pent up demand that was sitting on the fence, stuck at home while we were trying to get our you know, our local neighborhoods and communities healthy again. And we don't necessarily believe that the exodus from the city and urban core is going to be a forever trend. So we're trying to be smart, we're trying to be mindful, and we're trying to take advantage as much as we can of the demand that we're seeing today.
With regard to the demand, Chris, you know, Heatherwood, with the exception of a couple of properties that you recently built in Brooklyn and in Queens, was a Long Island-based developer with residential. Are you seeing more people trying to get into your apartments in the suburbs in Nassau and Suffolk County?
For those of you out there who are not familiar with Heatherwood, we are a Long Island-based organization, 70 years old. Michael, to your point about 80% of our portfolio is out in the suburbs of Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk County. We're seeing some strong demand in those markets, and the majority of our portfolio is out in Suffolk County. And I think you're seeing an influx from the city because we know that we are seeing some softening in our Long Island City portfolio as well as our Williamsburg portfolio. And, we're seeing activity levels that are, it's like strong seasonality out here at this point. So the question that really we have right now is this a short-term situation, or is this something that's going to become the new normal with, a baby boomer generation that was part of the reurbanization trend that was going on over the last few years? And are they going to decide to take their dollars that have really grown over the last decade and 401ks increasing and wealth creation, so on and so forth? And are they going to decide that, hey, as the group that's in a higher risk category, are they going to stay in the city, or are they going to make a choice and say, you know what, we're going to spend some of our years out in the suburbs? And I think that's one of the questions that we're discussing internally right now.
Deb, where do you see the market? I mean, you're in about 7 different markets in New Jersey. Who's renting? Okay. Are they New Jerseyites, as they would say, or are they foreigners from New York or other places? And, what are the trends that you're seeing?
So we're seeing a lot of the same trends that were existing before. I've always been a proponent of urbanizing suburbia and, creating these dynamic mixed-use downtowns that really are the fabric of New Jersey, right? There's very few true urban city environments in New Jersey. And so the cycle of traffic and the flow of traffic is as much about where you work as about where you grew up. The demographic trend of the millennials and the baby boomers, all those trends are still holding true. I think we've seen a little bit more increase of traffic coming from, the boroughs back into New Jersey, which has been a consistent pattern, but we definitely saw a spike. Now, some of it was for a summer rental and get me out of Manhattan for the summer. And so how many of those people stay here, to be determined. What we've seen more of, though, is people migrating west. So you've seen a drop, you saw a blip, I would say, in markets like Jersey City, Hoboken, up at, the Hudson River waterfront, where those are traditionally dense urban environments. And some of those people are migrating back west, either back towards their parents' houses or into a little bit more of a suburban environment. So, my property in Red Bank, as an example, some of my traffic, I'm seeing a lot more traffic coming out of Hoboken and Manhattan, whereas historically it was pretty much a Monmouth County demographic. But I think some of these trends are just magnified by what was already happening. And to Christopher's point, I'm not really sure how long the urban flight out of Manhattan sustains itself in terms of causing this fundamental shift in the New Jersey multifamily market.
So here's a question. All of you people need the banker over there, okay? The man in the middle. We have Kevin over there. In today's market, okay, with regard to banks being a little cautious in general, Kevin, since you are the lender amongst the group over here, are banks continuing to lend?
What we've seen from our client base at Peoples, and we're long-term construction lenders, and we've been through many cycles. We've seen a lot of our developer clients take a step back themselves and sort of reevaluate certain things they had been planning, deciding whether they should go ahead right now or put them on hold for a while. But I think we're like some other lenders that are very relationship focused, and so if we have good clients coming to us or good prospects looking to finance a multifamily development deal, and in the suburbs is probably where we've done most for residential development. For the right clients and the right project, we're definitely open for business. And so I would say, yes, lenders are in the market. It's clearly a lot more selective than it may have been 6 months ago. But I think that's true of clients looking for debt as it is for lenders.
So here's a question, Corey, you're the for sale developer. Chris, I don't believe Heatherwood has really built for sale housing. Deb, you haven't gone into that over there. With record mortgage rates low, okay, at this point over there, and the fact that people are looking to go out to the suburbs or leave the city, do you see an opportunity there? I mean, do you see opportunities for the for sale development today as a developer? Chris?
That question is more specific to our refinancing, right? Which is, okay, rates are historically low, and we have opportunities to refi at some, again, incredibly low rates. And what's that incentivizing not only us to do, but others to do, is to try and put that capital to work in other places. And look, at the end of the day, the rates that the urban developers are getting are the same that we're getting out in the suburbs. And to the extent that we can put those dollars to work at higher going in yields, that's what we look to do. And so the spreads are attractive. It allows us to be more competitive on land pricing in the suburbs. And so I think that's the way we're looking at it right now.
Deborah, let's talk about new developments that you're building. Where and what types, and the pricing.
So again, pricing has stayed relatively stable. Again, pocket dips. It's from an underwriting perspective. I think there's a recognition that, this is an interim cycle period that we're in. And so we have to remain true to our true underlying underwriting principles, right? And what's different this time is that normally when rents drop in Manhattan, we really feel it in New Jersey. We're having that adverse effect right now because the traffic is all coming this way. So we're very busy in design on a number of projects that we're already in the pipeline, and things that are moving through the approval process and moving through the design and development process, with the anticipation of moving into construction in late first quarter, beginning of second quarter next year. And I think that is a generic comment I can apply to some of my colleagues as well, where that's where the busiest sector of the market, as opposed to underlying new deals. There's definitely been an increase in that activity in the last 30 days. But we've started construction on a veteran housing project, which is in Jersey City. That is an affordable housing project. So the market trends of COVID and interim, short-term, long-term cycles are somewhat isolated from that asset. We're in design right now on a workforce housing project in Hackensack with Bergen County. And we're moving through the approvals and design process on projects in Essex County and in Milburn, and we're under construction on a project in Summit. And all of these are Class A markets and quality, sustainable, dense pipelines of potential end users. So the challenge, I think, in New Jersey, and I would venture to say Corey would agree with me, is it's an inventory issue. It's the state of where the projects are as compared to where the current demand is, and how quickly can you deliver these new homes to people while still taking advantage of this enlightened, let's move out to suburbia mentality.
A couple of points which I asked Corey, Chris, and Kevin on this with regard to the age-restricted communities. Corey, are you seeing more growth today in the age-restricted communities?
Yeah, so when we talk about age-restricted here in New Jersey, we were pretty confident in that market segment over the past couple of years, and it's grown, it's gotten more robust, and demand we're seeing in that space, for that particular segment of consumers, in the last couple of months has accelerated even more yet, and I'm not sure if that is just need-based or want-based, but we're seeing continued demand for our age-restricted communities. And frankly, Michael, that also might be because, look, we just have properly located our communities. So much of what we learned about age-restricted housing in New Jersey from the last recession to now is much to do with your positioning from a geographical standpoint, from a socioeconomic standpoint, from a prestige standpoint. What we certainly learned from the last recession was you can't just post up an active adult community in town and say, hey, this is great, people are going to want to downsize here. There has to be a lot more to the lifestyle. There has to be a lot more to the amenities offered. There has to be a lot more to do in and outside of the home you're purchasing.
I mean, with regard to that, Chris, I mean, some of your developments are aged developments, both with people and with regard to the age of the property.
Mhm.
Do you see some of these properties being knocked down and being rebuilt as age-restricted communities?
Yeah, good question. The answer is probably not. If we were to actually, recycle some of those units, they would be rebuilt as market rate. That doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily be positioned for, baby boomer or empty nester sort of generation. I think that's continues to be, a growing portion of our resident profile here. Heatherwood Golf, which was an 18-hole golf course in Setauket on Long Island in Suffolk County, is being repositioned for 200 units and a 9-hole golf course. And we're positioning that for lifestyle, and much like, our Villas property, which is out in Manorville, which I euphemistically call it Villas, but it's multiple communities that are adjacent to each other, over 1,500 units. The quality of that community from an exterior amenity standpoint is something that, and I worked for a company, before this, that owned 85,000 apartments throughout the country. I've never seen a single development that had these sort of exterior amenities, from golf course, 2 pools, tennis, basketball, beach volleyball, turf soccer, and it's one of the things that people are gravitating towards right now. If they're not moving towards the single family home and some of the great product that, say Corey is building, they're moving towards some clustered housing with really great exterior amenity spaces to be outside. And it's something that we've certainly benefited from.
Which, looking at the Pulte website, I think that's what Corey's communities are. They are communities with these amenities, with the features over there that people have. Kevin, with regard to that, what's your thoughts about what's the bank's position? I know your relationship lending, but are you bullish on over 55 senior housing? Because it's easier sometimes to get it approved with regard to certain communities in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we certainly lend on over 55 communities, and it's a product type that's been very successful on those projects that we've lent on. We've got a couple that are in New Jersey and Long Island, and one that leased up phase 1 very quickly and is now in the midst of a phase 2 lease up that's been very successful, or is being very successful right now. And that's anchored by some ground floor retail with some really great neighborhood amenities for the tenants that are going to live there, as well as great outdoor space and communal areas for people to socialize and to have outdoor spaces, which clearly is key right now. Another project is in Long Island, and that's more of a suburban walkable community that I think is very attractive to the demographic too. And that's
so basically that's more of a transit-oriented development.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't think too many of the renters are actually commuting, or certainly not. Well, pre-COVID, even I don't think they were commuting daily. But I think having that option of transit into Long Island and into the city has been important. But having the walkable suburban area with local restaurants and retail has been key too. So those projects we've been very happy with, and it's certainly a product type that we'd look to do more of. And I think you're right, the approvals are key. And I think a lot of how we think about some of these suburban residential developments based on supply and demand, there's still a very limited supply of multifamily product in a lot of these suburban markets. Regardless of this flight to the suburbs right now because of COVID, I think long term there's just still an undersupply of multifamily product in the suburbs that is, more product is needed to service that demand, whether it's right now or, hopefully once we get through COVID related issues and we're back to more of a real normal.
So here's a question for the 3 developers over here. COVID is here. we have a vaccine, things get better. What type of development do you see your companies getting involved with 2-3 years in the future over here in the suburbs? Chris? Or are you going to be spending more time in New York City as opposed to Long Island?
Yeah, no, I think that's the, multi-million dollar question for a lot of folks out there. For us, I think we're going to continue to throttle up on Long Island and be opportunistic in the boroughs. This is our home. We know these submarkets, we think, fairly well. And, but if there is a decision between Long Island and New York City, where we stand right now, for not the short term, but for the medium to long term, we'll put our dollars to work on Long Island.
Deb, where do you see yourself?
You know me, I'm Jersey strong. I would venture to say my projects are going to look a lot like they look now. We're all hearing about the demand, and where I like to focus in New Jersey is a little bit more of a boutique scale asset that can cater to that 55-plus-year-old person without them feeling like they're in an age-restricted community. And I think we're gonna continue to look for the urban light, suburban infill type of more boutique scale asset that can get delivered quickly and from an approvals process is not as much of a drain on a municipality. But definitely we're going to continue, we've been a big proponent of lifestyle and fundamental outdoor open space and outdoor amenity programming. And I think that trend is going to continue.
And transit-oriented developments.
In Jersey, I think a lot of transit-oriented development is a really good excuse to create critical mass. I think our transit infrastructure, we're getting some help out of the government now, but we're not a state of such efficient mass transportation that once you're past that 30-minute commute, you're commuting a couple of times a week. So it becomes a really good place to build critical mass, create that lifestyle, create that ground floor restaurant and piazza with open space and civic space, and create that community. But the days of everybody jumping on a train or the path to go into Midtown Manhattan right now is limited.
Corey, where do you see Pulte in the next?
Yeah, I'm not that dissimilar from Deb. I don't know that you're going to see dramatic deviation from our prior year's strategy in terms of where we're headed. We're working on a robust pipeline of communities every day, working them through the entitlement process. And in terms of what we're trying to add to the space, again, I don't think you're going to see a change in terms of the geographies that we're interested in terms of the consumer segments that we're interested in. Where you're likely to see more of a change, Michael, is in terms of how we design our homes to live. I think you're going to see more spaces to better cater to the lifestyles of folks who are now more interested in potentially working from home, who are more actively socializing at home with friends and family as safely and responsibly as they can, where you're going to see more creative uses of our outdoor spaces, and you're going to see more of those lifestyle-centric amenities that I spoke to earlier. And when we talk about the geographies, look, we are absolutely not shying away from downtown walkability. We are absolutely not shying away from transit-oriented development. Many of the stores, communities, I should say, that we're going to open here towards the end of this year and the early part of next year, yes, you're going to see that traditional suburbia style of community that you'd normally be accustomed to seeing a Pulte build. But specifically here, when we talk about New Jersey, we are almost entirely focused on redevelopment, repurposing, revitalization, picking up broken things and fixing them. So, think about the next large project we have coming online is in Somerville, New Jersey. It's going to be one of the largest redevelopment projects in central New Jersey, where we're taking land formerly owned by New Jersey Transit and by the borough of Somerville. We're building high density townhomes next door to a luxury apartment community There's going to be on-site civic space. There's going to be on-site retail space, and this is all within less than a mile walk from, kind of the thriving downtown Somerville business district. So we are absolutely not shying away from that segment of the market.
One last question before I finish. Do you see apartments today being readapted for a small home office since people are working from home? Chris?
Yeah, we do. As a product of design, we're still, I think, even re-examining again, not what's in the short term, but what is the new normal going to look like? And so, when we're designing some of our new communities, and both, Deborah and Corey, touched on it, we're considering what is this going to look like going forward from a work-live standpoint, right? Folks maybe living in some of the outer rings around the suburbs, right, with the intention that they may be commuting to work or their office maybe only a few times a month as opposed to 4 to 5 times a week. So I think we are looking at, not only how to reposition some of our spaces, but also what does that look like from a new build standpoint in the future?
So I think in summation, the developments are taking place in the suburbs. They can continue. Certain people are going to relocate to the suburbs. I'd like to thank Christopher, Kevin, Deborah, and Corey, and I'll see you next week.